Well, hey there, it's Catherine from CatherinePooler.com. In this video, we are going to make some handmade cards. We're going to use these stamp sets, and we're going to make cards that look like this. We're going to use them in a non-traditional way, though. Here are just 3 of the stamps. Actually, we're using a lot more than 3, but take this feather, for instance. The traditional way is to take that flat part, adhere it to your block, and then stamp with the rough side or the side that has the image in it, and you get a gorgeous stamped image. Well, what if you took the block and attached your stamp to the block with the design side touching the block, basically stamping with the back of the block? So basically you're just reverse stamping. You're stamping with the wrong side of the stamp. So what you want to look for in stamps that you use this technique with are stamps that have some general geometric shape to them, like a square or a circle or a rectangle. And I'm going to use several different examples so that you can get an idea of what to look for in your stamp stash and what might work. So the first stamp set we're going to use is the Zen Feather Stamp Set. I absolutely love this stamp set. The detailed feather is just so gorgeous. You can stamp it in a solid color, or you can stamp it in black and color it in, but I don't always want to color it in. So for this card, I'm going to stamp it first in black. I stamped it right side up and then upside down, which actually it's a feather, so it doesn't really have a right side. But then I'm going to take this flower stamp and I'm going to stamp with the reverse side. So I did the design facing the block. Another thing to look for when you're looking for stamps in your stash to do this technique with is you want a lot of surface area for the image or the stamp to actually be able to stick to the block. If there's not a lot of surface area, it's going to fall off a lot more easily. So with this reverse stamping technique, I'm also using some inking and watercolor techniques. If you're not familiar with Catherine Pooler inks, they are dye-based inks. They are water-based, so they are going to react with water. They are not permanent except for the black. The black is archival and it is permanent, so you can see when I add this wet ink to the black, it's not smearing. But anytime you stamp with color, a dye-based or a water-based ink, and you add water, it is going to activate. So it'll run and it'll bleed, which is great for water-based techniques like this. So I'm just inking the stamp with 2 different colors, and then I'm spritzing with a little bit of water. And then when I stamp it down, it's going to give you a fun watercolor look. So I'm just letting them dry in between, and I'm getting a fun rainbow effect here. So I'm just using a variety of different colors, and at first I just did 4 on the side, and then I decided I wanted to fill in a little bit more than that. I am using watercolor cardstock. If I used regular cardstock, it would be too much water and the cardstock wouldn't react as well. So a good watercolor cardstock is preferable when using a lot of water. So you can see there my stamp did fall off the block. This stamp actually doesn't have a ton of surface area. It has enough surface area to be able to be used in this way, but there are stamps that I'm going to use later in the video that have more surface area and stick to the blocks better. So the first technique piece, I'm setting it aside and letting it dry, and then I was inspired and I wanted to try again because I thought, hey, this feather is a really great image to use for this technique. Before we dive into the technique on this one, I want to talk a little bit about a black archival ink. Archival ink does stain stamps, so you may want to keep a bottle of Ultra Clean on hand. I find it's a really good cleaner. If you ink your stamp with black and immediately use Ultra Clean, you will be able to get off most of the black from your stamp. If you let it sit for any length of time, it will stain, but no worries, as long as you clean it and you stamp and it's clear and it's not still stamping black, you're good to go. Now you can see right here where I stamp with yellow, it does not pull off any of that black residue from your stamp. So staining really is not too much of an issue unless you stain so much that then you have trouble with placement. So just be aware of that and be careful, and keep Ultra Clean on hand. So now I've turned the feather over and adhered or stuck it, or because photopolymer stamps will cling to the acrylic block, so it's clinging on the wrong side. So the flat side is what's showing. I'm using Samba and Tiki Torch and limoncello. My limoncello was a little bit light, so I just used my ink refill and just squeezed out the ink and spread it around with the nozzle to refresh it. And then I did the ombre stamping or the ink blending stamping between the colors with a little bit of water. And then, so I'm doing half of the rainbow on one side and the other half of the rainbow on the other side. So lime Ricky, all that jazz, and Flirty Fuchsia. I'm doing that middle color first and then adding the other two colors on the top and bottom. Once I finished the stamping of all those colors, it wasn't watercolory enough for me. So I just spritzed it with some more water and I'm just letting it kind of move around and do its thing, you know, because this is watercolor paper. So feel free to add water till your heart's content, until you get the look you're going for. So while my watercolory rainbow technique piece is drying, I'm going to go ahead and assemble the card base. So I have a 5.5 by 4.25 inch card base, just adding a big wide stripe from the Black Tie Gala paper pack, and then some liquid glue, and I'm attaching my first technique piece. I wanted a simple thanks sentiment, so I grabbed my Note of Thanks stamp set. This is a hand-lettered thanks. I just embossed it in white on black, and I thought that was a really great contrast. That's it for that card. Pretty easy and simple, but it's very striking. Now next up for this watercolory feather card, I heart this card. I love the kind of I don't know what it's called. It feels very Zen to me, I think, which is funny. The name of the stamp set is Zen Feather. But I just added a Create die cut. I did some clear embossing over the top of it, and then I grabbed that small little happy sentiment from the Zen Feather Stamp Set, added that on there, and just added a couple Crater Lake sequins, and it's all done. For the next card, I used the Strolling Border Stamp Set. This one is perfection if you want stripes or long borders of color on your card. So I pulled a rainbow, so pink, orange, and yellow are going on the first one. Sorry, I was off screen here. Whoops. So I did pink, orange, and yellow. Spritz that off camera. When I spritz on camera, then I get water all over my work surface. So for this, I just pulled it off camera, gave a spritz, and then came back. So you won't see the spritzing. But every single time I stamped, I moved the top color off, moved the middle color up to the top, did the left-hand color in the middle, and then I added the new color to the left. So then next up, I'm doing yellow and then green and then blue. And so then it's going to be like a stacked kind of diagonal situation when we're done. So the next one, Fiesta Blue in the middle with Lime Ricky and a Flirty Fuchsia on the sides. Just give that a spritz and stamp it down. Each time I'm done inking, I just wipe my stamp off with a damp paper towel, and that's enough to remove the color and not cross-contaminate between colors. So Flirty Fuchsia, Fiesta Blue, and then Be Mine on the end. Again, a little bit more spritzing and stamping, and then we're just going to let this piece dry. Isn't this a cool rainbow look? So while that's drying, I'm going to work on the sentiment. I'm using the Isn't She Lovely stamp set. I grabbed my Misty stamping tool. I'm going to stamp the outline lovely. You can leave it like this, and it's just gorgeous. There are two more layers to be used here. You can use the lovely outline with the lovely ombre piece, or you can use the outline with the solid, or you can use the solid with the ombre. Lots of different possibilities here on stamping this sentiment. I absolutely love the uniqueness of this stamp set and the possibilities with how you stamp it. And then I need a secondary sentiment. I need Have a Lovely Day. So I stamped it in embossing ink and embossed it in white on black, which I always think is such a fantastic contrast when you're using rainbow colors. So I'm just going to cut around it. I'm not using my paper cutter. I'm just using my little cutter bee scissors. And then you can, oh my gosh, look at how good that looks. And the ombre stamped with that Twilight ink with the black outline, I just think that is so sharp. So have a lovely day, and then the heart from the lovely stamp set, just stamp a couple of those, add on a couple sequins, and you've got a super fun card. So for our final card, we're going to use the Background Textures stamp set, which is perfect for this technique. They are really great rectangles. The patterns are fantastic, so there's so many things you can do with these. This stamp set came out as part of our Club Circe subscription program, which started April of 2019. So if you missed it, you can go ahead and subscribe to Club Circe. You get a monthly shipment of fantastic stamps and dies if you do the Deluxe membership. And you can go shop past products from previous months. As I'm doing this, I'm going to tell you that there was a little mistake that I made while I'm doing this. The whole point of this video is reverse stamping. So I put the blocks on here. I lined them up on the cardstock where I wanted them to go. I just wanted them in a line with a little bit of space in between them. And I wanted to stamp them onto my watercolor cardstock in rainbow fashion. So I did that. And I let the water sit and kind of move around a little. And then I stamped. And can you see what's happening? Mostly on that right houndstooth pattern. Sigh. I didn't turn them over. I didn't reverse my stamp. So let me try that again. So I grabbed another piece of watercolor cardstock. Now I didn't throw out the first piece because I can still use that. It's not unsalvageable. It just wasn't the point of this video. So I grabbed another piece of cardstock. I turned my stamps over, cleaned them off real good, and added them to my MISTI in the way that I wanted. And then I did my inking again. So I'm using the mini ink pads in party colors because they're small and they're easy to get just little spaces inked up without having too much surface area to work with. So I just did it in, straight across from left to right, did my rainbow colors, and then spritzed it with water. And then I'm letting that water move around a little bit. The blue and the purple wasn't mixing together as much as I wanted. I wanted to be careful not to add too much water though, because I didn't want it to get waterlogged. So I just used my finger to kind of move it around and mix it a little. The Fiesta Blue and Grape Crush still weren't mixing and getting watercolory looking enough for my taste. So I just added plain water to that stamp and stamped it down. That will reactivate the water and then it will help achieve the look I was going for. So once I was satisfied with that, I let it dry. And then I went to my stamps to find some flowers or leaves or something that would look fun with this. So I decided on my Love Grows Here stamp set and I chose the leaves. So I chose one that was solid and one that was a little bit open. I thought that was a fun contrast to add two different ones and stamped them using my MISTI stamping tool. And then I also thought it was fun to stamp it one way and then just turn the piece of paper 180 degrees and stamp again. So it's kind of a mirror image on each side. I stamped it a couple times because this is watercolor cardstock and it's bumpy and it may be a little bit tough to get a smooth, clean image. And I ended up missing one spot. There was one spot stubborn there. So I just took a little black pen and filled it in when I was done. And then I'm adding a thank you die cut and then a couple little polka dots. I'm going to finish that off with Crater Lake sequins. So I'm just shaking some out on the card and letting them fall where they may, and then kind of figuring out from there where to glue them down. So there's no real science to this. It's just kind of whatever is pleasing to your eye. Usually I do an odd amount, like 3. If I do 5, I usually do 3 on one side and 2 on the other of maybe like an image or a sentiment. Here I'm just kind of sprinkling them all in and amongst the leaves. Now to add some extra oomph to this card, I grabbed the scroll border die. This came out in our Circe subscription for winter, and the scroll is supposed to mimic the ironwork on a sleigh, but I think it works for so many different occasion cards. It's just a great all-around flourish or scroll element to add to your card. So I did white on white. I thought that would be a really nice touch. And then I mounted the watercolor cardstock technique piece on a piece of black cardstock with just a little bit of a border on the top and the bottom to add some contrast. I added that thank you, and we're all done. Now let's take a look back at some of these cards. So we did the feathers and we did the rainbow in 2 different ways. And then we did more rainbows. There's a rainbow theme going on here, rainbow with black and white. But all of these are different. One is just kind of a circle shape. One is goes the length of the stamp. Another one is just borders across the card. And then we've got rectangle shapes across the card as well. So you can see lots of different ways to use this technique. Don't just stay stuck on rainbow colors either. Go outside the box and try different things. Leave me a comment and let me know what you think, what inspired you, what you're excited to try. And I'm so glad you're here with me. Thanks for hanging out. While you're here, I hope you will check out other videos that I've done. Please leave me a comment, give me a thumbs up, share with your friends. All of the above helps YouTube know that you enjoy my content, and I really appreciate it. I will see you again soon.